A man runs into a crowded marketplace in broad daylight carrying a lantern, even though the sun is already blazing overhead. He's not looking for coins. He's not looking for food. He's screaming that something has died, and nobody around him understands what he means. If that sounds insane, good, because the world he was describing is your world too, hyper-connected, overflowing with information, and quietly starving for meaning. But first, let me tell you why this matters more today than ever. Europe in the 19th century looked confident on the surface. Science was advancing. Industry was roaring. Churches still stood at the center of cities, casting long shadows over cobblestone streets. The old order seemed intact. But beneath that confidence, something was cracking. Into that world stepped Friedrich Nietzsche, frail in body, fierce in mind, walking alone through alpine air with notebooks in his pocket and dynamite in his sentences. He wasn't a system builder in the usual sense. He didn't write like a calm professor arranging concepts neatly in rows. He wrote like a man hearing the foundations of civilization begin to tremble. And then he wrote the line that would echo through modern philosophy like a thunderclap. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. Now this is where most people get it wrong. Nietzsche was not simply celebrating atheism. He wasn't tossing out a smug slogan for edgy teenagers. He was diagnosing a civilizational crisis. He saw that the Western world had spent centuries anchored to a religious framework that gave life a built-in structure, good and evil, purpose and destiny, suffering and redemption. And then, slowly, modernity itself began to dissolve that framework. Science, historical criticism, secular politics, consumer capitalism, together they weakened the old sacred center. The terrifying part wasn't that people stopped believing. The terrifying part was that they continued living as if the old values still had authority after the foundation beneath them had vanished. That's the real meaning of the death of God. Not a murder mystery, a meaning crisis. And if that sounds abstract, look around. We have more convenience than any generation in history. Yet anxiety is a public epidemic. We have endless entertainment, yet boredom feels existential. We have access to ancient wisdom, modern stoicism, Stoic philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, self-improvement systems, and still millions of people wake up asking the same silent question: why am I doing any of this? Nietzsche saw this coming. He understood that once the highest value collapses, everything below it begins to wobble. Morality, identity, purpose, even truth itself. What he wrote next changed everything. The full force of Nietzsche's insight appears in the parable of the madman. The madman cries out to the crowd, announcing the death of God, and then asks a series of horrifying questions. What were we doing when we unchained the earth from its sun? Where is it moving now? Are we not falling endlessly? This is not casual philosophy. This is spiritual vertigo. Nietzsche is describing what happens when a civilization loses its ultimate reference point. Imagine a compass that suddenly stops pointing north. The problem isn't merely confusion. The problem is that every direction starts to look equally arbitrary. If there is no transcendent source of value, then on what basis do you say one way of life is better than another? Why prefer sacrifice over pleasure, truth over comfort, courage over distraction? And here's where most people retreat into a misunderstanding. They assume Nietzsche's message is simple nihilism. Nothing matters, so do whatever you want. But Nietzsche hated passive nihilism. He feared it. He saw it as the exhausted state of a culture that no longer believes in anything higher, yet lacks the strength to create anything new. Passive nihilism doesn't look dramatic. It looks ordinary. It looks like endless scrolling, endless consumption, endless irony. It may sound harsh, but let's be honest. A lot of what passes for freedom in the modern world is just sophisticated avoidance. More options, less purpose, more stimulation, less meaning. We call it liberation, but often it's just drift. And here's the controversial part. Many people who claim to be finding themselves are actually hiding from the harder task of creating themselves. They mistake preference for purpose. They confuse personal branding with identity. And they call that authenticity. Nietzsche's question cuts deeper. If the old source of meaning has collapsed, who has the strength to become a source of meaning, not discover it like a buried object? Create it, embody it, carry it. This is why Nietzsche matters in modern philosophy, and why he still collides with contemporary self-improvement culture. So much advice today promises optimization without asking the most dangerous question of all. Optimized for what? more productivity toward which end, better habits in service of which values, a calmer nervous system for what kind of life. Even traditions like Stoic philosophy and modern Stoicism can be misunderstood here. Stoicism offers powerful life lessons: discipline, emotional control, acceptance of what you cannot change. That's real wisdom. But if you use Stoic philosophy merely to become a more efficient machine inside a meaningless system, you have not solved the problem. You have anesthetized it. Ancient wisdom can teach you how to endure. Nietzsche asks whether you are brave enough to justify your existence. And there's something even more shocking. He believed suffering might be the key. Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." It's one of his most famous lines because it slices through every era. The issue is not whether life is painful. It is. The issue is whether your suffering belongs to something that feels worth carrying. This is where it gets interesting. Modern culture often treats suffering as a glitch, something to eliminate, medicate, distract, optimize away. And to be clear, reducing unnecessary suffering is good. But Nietzsche's point is deeper. A life protected from all struggle can become thin, fragile, and spiritually weightless. You do not become strong by avoiding resistance. You become strong by metabolizing it. That's the transformation Nietzsche demands. Not comfort, but transfiguration. Not escape, but authorship. You take the raw material of your pain, loss, humiliation, failure, loneliness, and force it to answer a higher question. What can this become in me? And yes, that sounds severe, because it is. Nietzsche is not a philosopher of reassurance. He is a philosopher of becoming. He believes you are not here to be soothed into passivity. You are here to shape a life so deliberate that even your wounds become part of your design. Rhetorical question. If every source of ready-made meaning vanished tomorrow, your job title, your social role, your inherited beliefs, what would still remain that you could honestly call yours? This is why Nietzsche remains explosive in philosophy. He doesn't let you outsource your purpose to institutions, trends, ideologies, or even tradition. And that includes religion, politics, and here's another debatable statement: therapy when it becomes an endless project of self-analysis without self-overcoming. Reflection matters, healing matters, but at some point, if all you do is interpret yourself, you never become yourself. Now compare that with the appeal of Stoic philosophy. The Stoics teach that you cannot control events, only your response. Nietzsche would agree up to a point, but unlike some modern Stoicism content, he doesn't want mere resilience. He wants creative power. He wants you not only to endure the world, but to give style to your character, to shape chaos into form. So the practical application is not, believe whatever makes you feel good. It is much harder. Define your values consciously. Choose commitments that demand something from you. Build rituals that reinforce them. Create before you consume. Risk being misunderstood. Stop waiting for the universe to hand you a mission statement. Because meaning, for Nietzsche, is not a gift. It is a task. Now we reach Nietzsche's most radical idea. If God is dead, names the collapse of inherited meaning. And he who has a why to live can bear almost any how points toward the need for purpose. Then what kind of human being can actually live after that collapse without falling into despair? Nietzsche's answer is not a return to old certainties. It is the emergence of a stronger type of person, someone capable of value creation. This is tied to another of his famous lines: "Become who you are." That sounds inspirational on a coffee mug. In Nietzsche, it is almost terrifying, because you are not a fixed essence waiting to be uncovered like a hidden gem. Become who you are means your life is a creative act of discipline, confrontation, and selection. You must decide which impulses in you deserve cultivation, which habits deserve extinction, which fears have been impersonating your personality for years. And here's the emotional peak of Nietzsche's thought: meaning is more real when you take responsibility for making it, not because it's easy, because it costs you something. Inherited meaning is stable but borrowed. Created meaning is vulnerable but alive. This is why the death of God is not merely a catastrophe. It is also an invitation, a brutal one. If the old heavens no longer guarantee purpose, then human beings face an extraordinary demand to become worthy of freedom, not freedom as endless choice, but freedom as authorship, freedom as self-legislation, freedom as the courage to say, "I will be answerable for the shape of my life." Ask yourself, how many of your convictions are actually yours? How many were inherited from family, absorbed from culture, copied from your algorithmic feed, or borrowed from whatever tribe made you feel safe. Nietzsche forces an uncomfortable possibility. What if your crisis of meaning is not a sign that life is empty, but a sign that second-hand values are no longer enough? What if the anxiety you feel is, in part, the pain of undeveloped strength? That doesn't mean inventing values at random. It means testing them against life. Do they deepen your capacity? Do they make you more courageous, more truthful, more able to bear reality without numbing yourself? Do they turn suffering into wisdom rather than bitterness? That is where ancient wisdom and modern philosophy begin to meet, not in certainty, but in practice. In that sense, Nietzsche can stand in productive tension with Stoic philosophy. The Stoics teach you to master your judgments. Nietzsche asks what values your judgments serve. The Stoics remind you that fate is not under your control. Nietzsche asks whether you can love your fate enough to shape yourself through it. The Stoics offer steadiness. Nietzsche demands creation. Together, they form a powerful answer for a chaotic age. Endure what you must and create what you can. So no, the world is not automatically meaningful. That is precisely the point. And strange as it sounds, that may be the most dignifying truth imaginable. Because if meaning is not handed to you, then your life is not a script you merely perform. It is a work you compose. Go back to that marketplace. The lantern, the shouting, the crowd laughing because they think the madman is insane. Maybe the real madness was theirs. Maybe the crowd was already living in the ruins of a broken world, still repeating moral language whose foundation they no longer understood. Maybe that's us. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people do not suffer from a lack of information. They suffer from a lack of confrontation. They consume philosophy, self-improvement, wisdom, life lessons, modern stoicism, ancient wisdom, yet avoid the one task all of it points toward, choosing what their life is for. So try this for 7 days. Come back and tell me what changed. Every morning, write down 3 things: what you are willing to suffer for, what you refuse to live for anymore, and one action today that makes your values visible in the real world. Not in your head, not in a post, in reality. Then, at night, ask one brutal question: did I live by conviction today or did I drift? No excuses, no performance, just honesty. This won't make life neat. Nietzsche offers no neat ending, but it will make your life more yours, and that changes everything. Because the death of God in Nietzsche's hands is not the end of meaning. It is the end of outsourced meaning. What comes next depends on the courage of the person left standing in the aftermath. Most people will spend their entire lives avoiding this truth. Will you create the meaning you are waiting for?